When Percy Jackson and the Olympians season one premiered, a lot of us, especially the book fans, wanted this to be the adaptation, right? So Rick Riordan was finally involved. The movies had been released 10 years ago and they were finally fading from cultural relevancy. Disney Plus had the reach, the budget, the platform for a really great book series like Percy Jackson. And yet, when it premiered in December 2023, something felt off, right? And it's not like season one was necessarily bad, but it also wasn't this great adaptation that the book fans were hoping for. And I kind of want to talk about exactly what that disappointment felt like because it wasn't something where you could pinpoint one fatal flaw. It was more so like they just couldn't recapture like the magic that you really feel when you're reading the book series. Season 2, however, I'm glad to say that's been released in December 2025. Only 2 episodes that we've seen for so far feels different. And I kind of just want to talk in this book, in this video essay about, what went wrong in season one, how and why season two feels different, and like such a good course correction from season one, and what went wrong the first time around, and how season two is just restored my faith in the Percy Jackson kind of cinematic universe. Let's start with the elephant in the room, which is Rick Riordan's involvement. So, season one wasn't just judged as like, oh, this is just a show. No, it was judged as this is finally the faithful adaptation that we've been longing for. And Rick Riordan kind of hyped that up, right? So, after years of criticizing the films, Rick Riordan was sort of positioning the Disney Plus series as this faithful adaptation. And fans weren't just hoping for like, oh, we're getting a faithful adaptation of the book. They're also hoping for like emotional competence, right? Like, no, this is Percy. He's, a younger character. The movies famously had made him older, and they were really hoping to kind of recapture that magic of the original book series. And yet, when season one arrived, the reaction was complicated. At least online, you would see a lot of people online saying, well, sort of three main questions emerge, right? This is accurate, but it doesn't capture the fun factor. Where's Percy's personality was a big one. And then the third one, and I think the one that's most relevant, at least to this YouTube video, is, why does everything feel rushed and flat at the same time? And I would like to actually linger on this criticism because I think it's completely valid. Season one was paradoxical. So there were moments that were too rushed. I felt like, we were moving through the pace a little bit too quickly. The pacing was off, definitely. And that led to certain emotional moments feeling flat. So I'm thinking, especially like the Minotaur moment, the fight with Ares is a big one, the Medusa moment, they all feel very flat just because the pacing was too quick. We didn't get to linger and actually, find our footing with these characters. And, especially with an 8 episode kind of show, we're giving you 8 episodes, like you should be able to kind of build that emotional arc with these characters. Season one's biggest issue, in my opinion, wasn't casting, it wasn't budget, it wasn't accuracy, it was pacing. The Percy Jackson books are chaotic in the best way. There's danger, there's humor, there's sarcasm, but it also had moments of deep sincerity and emotion. And part of what it takes to get there is letting us know who the characters actually are. But in the show, Percy seemed more earnest than, sarcastic. Annabeth seemed more reserved than like deeply brilliant. And Grover was lacking like any of his anxious humor. And, part of this comes down to, child actors, but a lot of that comes down to letting this scenes breathe, right? So if it's a moment like there was that moment where Percy in the show, sits on the chair and is covered by gold. And it's like it didn't feel earned because we don't really know who Percy is. Like the show is telling us who Percy is, but we need to know when we need to actually be shown who Percy is. And I think that was a big thing that was lacking in season one. And, there was a strong sense that they wanted to be taken seriously. But if you don't allow for us to actually know these characters and feel for them and know where they're coming from, then all those serious, quote unquote, emotional moments fall flat. And that felt very disappointing for fans, at least of the book. I know a lot of people were talking about this because, again, this was supposed to be the fix after, the movies came out a decade prior. Season 2 makes a crucial change. It shows us who these characters are instead of just telling us. Part of this is definitely that the pacing improves, things are allowed to actually land. So the jokes land, emotional scenes are allowed to play out, right? Instead of just cutting out to, a black screen like they used to do in season 1. So I think that's a huge, huge part of what's actually helping, season 2, at least the first 2 episodes, actually land with people. Another huge thing is that the characterization of these characters gets a lot closer to the books. And I think part of this is actually that the child actors are better than they were at the beginning of season 1 for sure. But I think a lot of this is also just that the characters are allowed to loosen up a little bit. So Percy is back to his, sarcastic kind of, comments that he makes in the books. There was this really great moment in season 2 where Annabeth is having this whole "I don't like the things you like" Percy moment, and he's like, "Did you watch Jaws?" And it's such a funny, well-timed joke. So I think that's a huge part of it, that the characterization of these characters is actually closer to the books. And I think season 2, again, at least the first 2 episodes, have definitely restored my faith in Rick Riordan kind of saying, you know what, I'm going to be involved. I think he's an executive producer on the show. And, I think it's just such a good mix of things that have kind of happened. I think a huge one as well is that they're working on practical sets now instead of working with the whole vision system that they were previously. I think that's huge as well. So I'm just happy to report that season 2 is back on track and these characters feel like the characters I read growing up. Here's the thing that I think a lot of fans, especially book fans like me, are starting to realize. You know, the adaptation process was never going to be 100%, accurate. I think season 1, what really kind of dragged it down, I think, was those expectations that I think a lot of fans had. And, I mean, to be fair, Rick Riordan was kind of telling us this was the best ever adaptation. It's going to be completely accurate. And we didn't get that. And I think that's fine. But I think season 2 just feels like a confident expansion of what they had. We don't only want accuracy, at least for me. I'm not always looking for accuracy. I just want them to recapture the spirit. Like, I want these, when I'm watching the show, to feel like how I felt when I was actually reading the book, not just like, this is what happened, this is what happened. I just feel like the characters have to feel how they felt. And recapturing that feeling is a very tricky process. And I'm so glad that they're doing it. And, we've only seen 2 episodes so far, but I'm really hoping and I'm really at least now confident in the production team and everyone working behind the scenes to kind of steer this to a great sort of ending for the book. And I'm really hoping they adopt all 5 books now. I'm like really happy with where we're at in season 2. Something that I think is going to be, with season 2 that's tricky still is, the exposition is still a little bit much for me. Sometimes they figure out stuff too quickly. Certain characterizations are not my favorite right now, but I think that's something that they're working on. And I definitely expect that, especially just as we keep going deeper into even stuff that hasn't been adapted yet. So we've never really even seen this stuff on like camera before. I'm just really even more excited because I think they're getting better. The actors are getting better, the pacing is getting better, and I think the exposition will continue to improve as well. I mean, this is something that happened in the books as well, so I can't expect this to be, this is not Hamnet, but it's a really great adaptation, in my opinion. Really excited about season two. So just let me know, guys, like, what do you guys think of season two, at least so far, these two episodes that we've kind of seen? I'm really excited. Let me know your thoughts down below.